Hello there. My name is Armando, and something I find fascinating about change is how often we misunderstand the feeling of resistance. In my experience, we often interpret difficulty in a very personal way. So, if something feels hard to maintain, we assume there is something wrong with us. There must be a lack of discipline, a lack of motivation, a lack of consistency, but real life is rarely that simple. Very often, what we experience as a personal failure is actually a structural mismatch. So, not a character flaw, but friction. There is a subtle but very important difference between something being difficult and something being misaligned. And in my experience, we tend to treat both as if they were the same. So, for example, imagine someone decides to start exercising regularly. So they feel good on some days, perhaps a bit resistant on others, really enthusiastic at times, and completely unmotivated at other moments. And this fluctuation is not abnormal. It is the most predictable human pattern imaginable, and yet so many of us immediately translate it into self criticism. We say things like, I'm not disciplined enough, or I always start things and then I stop, or even I'm not just that kind of person to do this. But behavior does not exist in isolation. Every action is competing with energy levels, with mood, stress, sleep quality, workload, distractions, and with countless invisible variables. So, change does not happen in a perfect laboratory. It happens inside real, messy, unpredictable days, which means inconsistency is not a psychological defect, it's feedback, a signal that something about that expectation, the intensity, or the design of the routine may be a bit unrealistic. And that's a very different interpretation. So instead of asking, why can't I stick to this? Perhaps try, what is making this behavior unnecessarily hard to sustain? Sometimes the answer is surprisingly mundane. It's things like too much intensity, too much rigidity, or perhaps even too much pressure to perform perfectly. But we humans adapt far better to rhythms than to drastic rules. We're far more responsive to flexibility than to force. And yet, many change attempts begin with a kind of silent aggression towards ourselves, which is absurd. So we say things like, from tomorrow, everything will be different. There are no excuses. And from tomorrow, there is a new version of me. And it sounds powerful, but it often creates tension rather than stability because drastic mental contracts are emotionally expensive. They rely on constant willpower, and in my experience, willpower is one of the most unreliable resources we possess when it comes to change. What tends to work better is something much less dramatic. Try reducing friction, making behaviors easier to begin, easier to repeat, and easier to recover when we interrupt them. So, not heroic effort really, but intelligent design, sometimes of what's already there. So, for instance, instead of committing to an ideal routine, try committing to a version so manageable it almost feels trivial. Instead of demanding perfection, try expecting variability. Instead of interpreting inconsistency as failure, try treating it as information. And this shift alone can dramatically change how sustainable change feels. Because then the emotional burden is reduced, and sustainability is rarely about intensity. It is about whether something fits realistically into the texture of our life. So perhaps the real question is not how do I force myself to change, but rather how do I make change feel less like a fight against myself? Something to consider, and as always, I would love to hear your thoughts on whether that resonates with your life experience.